Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today. I am Bonnie Eberle. I work for the WSET. I am the head of commercial growth. And today we have a very exciting topic, one that I can tell you is without a doubt, probably in the top one or two questions that I get asked without question. And we are here to dive into the multiple different forms of education that are out there if you're trying to get into the drinks industry. I'm going to do a little housekeeping here. If you have questions along the way, we absolutely want to hear them. Please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box. Also, as you know, the session's being recorded, so just a reminder about that. And at the end of this session, there will be links and information sent out post-event. So with that, I'm glad to see people are popping in their information. We have got folks from all over the place. India, Kansas City, Missouri, Florida, all over. I love to hear it. I'm going to start by introducing our incredible panel. I love seeing these faces. Some of the smartest minds are sitting here with us today. First, I'd like to introduce Caroline Herman. She is Master of Wine, and she is the Import-Export Program Manager at the U.S. Department of Treasury. Caroline, welcome. We've got Julie Colin-Theobald, the Executive Director for the Court of Master Sommeliers in America. We've got Jenny Hemmer. She is a diploma holder, Director of GuildSom International. And last but not least, my dear colleague, Christine Kamine, also a diploma holder, talking to all of us today about the WSET. And with that, I am going to start by having everyone introduce themselves a little bit. We'll go in reverse. Christine, why don't we start with you? And then we'll go around the room and hear from everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you everyone for joining today. As Bonnie said, this is getting to talk about all the different organizations and paths that can help you move forward in your career is something I think we talk about a lot. If I'm speaking for myself, but I think hopefully for the other women as well. So we're very fortunate to have this opportunity to talk to you all today about our paths and how they can maybe inspire you on your journey as well. So in terms of my introduction, so I currently work for the WSET, as Bonnie said. I am head of APP development for the Americas region. APP, if you're not familiar with WSET, stands for Approved Program Providers. So I and my team basically work with all of our approved program providers throughout North, Central, and South America. Doing everything from working with folks who want to become providers, helping them learn how to join our network globally, become educators and upskilling, helping folks with the day-to-day operations of these organizations, helping educators, hone their teaching skills, and lots of things in between of running an APP. I've been with WSET coming up on 7 years now, primarily in this kind of business development or APP development role, but I also work very closely and on the faculty of the educator development team. So I help teach our educator training program as well. So the education piece of this organization is very near and dear to my heart. I have my diploma and I'm a certified educator for levels 1 through 3 in wine. I've got a couple other qualifications in there. I have some spirits experience as well as beer and sake. Before working at WSET, I started my career in the journalism world, actually, a non-wine path. But that led me to working at Wine Spectator. So that was one of my first jobs in this industry. After that, I worked for Pernod Ricard for a few years as a wine ambassador. A bit of a silly title, but a very fun role. I'm happy to talk a bit more about later. And after Pernod Ricard, I've been here with WSET now, as I said, for about 7 years. I'm based in New York City, and I'm looking forward to a conversation with the rest of these wonderful women.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. Lots of very interesting details there. Let's move on to Jenny. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Thanks, Bonnie. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jenny Hemmer. I started my beverage career over 22, 23 years ago. I actually started off in retail sales with the Gala Winery and select distributors around the country, and really just fostered this excitement for trying to learn more about this amazing industry. So, kind of a unique path to get me where I am today with GuildSom as the executive director. But all of those kind of, I think, different experiences working in restaurants and retail and convenience stores and PR and communications and wine and spirits education really, I think, just kind of fostered that curiosity that we're always learning, but we're also always educating, and no matter what role we're in. So about 4 years ago, I had a really cool opportunity to join GuildSom International and take it into a really unique path that GuildSom doesn't educate or doesn't certify through CMS or WSET or Society of Wine Educator or Wine Scholar Guild. We exist for a resource that really can complement all of those different learning paths. So I'll share a little bit more about that later. But where we are today at GuildSom, we are a educational membership organization that really exists to support the beverage community as they're wanting to learn more and connect. And so often for those that are studying through the paths of my fellow panelists today as well. So we're really excited to be able to have this opportunity to share some of those insights today. But yeah, it's amazing to kind of reflect back sometimes on over 20 years of different parts of the industry and kind of how we all kind of arrive at this same spot today. So excited to be here and to share more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny. Let's move along to Julie. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Julie Theobald. I joined the Court of Master Sommeliers about 4 years ago. I came from outside the wine industry. I'm not a master sommelier. Really, at the time, the master sommeliers were looking to bring in folks from the outside to help lead the organization through change and setting up for the future. And so I came in along with several outside board members who are not master sommeliers to really kind of take the organization up to the next level. So my background is I worked for the first half of my career in the corporate world. I worked for Procter & Gamble in brand management and marketing. I worked on the Febreze brand. I launched the Tide to Go pen. If you've had the Tide pen, that was my project. And then I worked for the second half of my career leading a nonprofit organization called the Educational Theater Association. So I had both the corporate and the nonprofit side. And it's funny reflecting, as Jenny was saying, because my very first job when I was 17 was a server in a restaurant. And I remember being so intimidated to open a bottle of wine when I had to do that. So it's kind of a bit of a full circle. But yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I've learned a lot about wine since I joined, and now have my CMS level 1, which I did when I joined the organization.
That is fantastic. And I will tell you that for so many of us, it starts with as simple as I worked as a server. And I can't tell you how much that sort of rings true throughout so many careers, whether you were stocking shelves or whether you were just trying to get a few bucks in your pocket. I think we've all ended up there in some way. So I think you're speaking to a lot of people when you share that. So next, and certainly last but not least, Miss Caroline, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey everyone, I'm really happy to be part of this amazing group. And I just have to say that I think I have utilized all of your amazing wine education certifications along the way on my journey. So similar to Jenny, I started about 20 years ago and started selling wine. And at Whole Foods, actually. And I think that was one of the best exposures for me because it brought me in contact with labels and prices and consumer questions. And it was so stressful when I first started. I had no idea what I was doing. And people were asking me questions and they wanted answers. And I would run back and like look things up in a book, and it was miserable. But at any rate, it was, you got to think on your feet and you learn pretty quickly. So at any rate, I am a beverage law lawyer. So I actually practice for a law firm in their food and beverage practice group and the environmental law practice group. And that comes after 20 years working for the federal government. So I definitely had a non-traditional entree into wine. I was with the Environmental Protection Agency, and then I was also with the Treasury Department. And Bonnie, apologies, I need to update my bio, but I left the bureau within the Treasury Department that regulates beer, wine, and spirits. So I ran the import-export program there for a number of years. And I teach WSET, so educated or certified educator for diploma and for up to sake level 3. Yeah, I guess well, one of my first jobs was years and years ago was as an equity analyst, and so I was in the Czech Republic and having to write on all these different commodities, and of course being in the Czech Republic, I got assigned to breweries, which was really, really fun. So I kind of feel like alcohol beverages have followed me throughout my career, and so now I'm merging a bunch of my interests, which is environment and alcohol beverages together.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. I think one of the things that we can already see, if not evidenced by our attendee list, which is very international, this industry, without a doubt, takes us in a very wide space. We're not, while we are doing things like working in retail stores and things of that nature, it also can expand beyond it. So one of the things I always tell people who are interested in getting in, don't be afraid of jumping in if you're working in an auxiliary industry, because quite frankly, it all touches this industry. And that's definitely one of the things we're going to talk a little bit more about. I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the backgrounds that we've just been talking about. And more specifically, I want to hear your thoughts on, or your experiences, I should say, on what qualifications did you come in contact as your, career journey was growing, and kind of what helped you in your decision-making process lean into those qualifications. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Julie this time. If you want to tell us a little bit more in-depth information about what you've done. And I know that, as you said, you're kind of coming at this from a more corporate view, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about how this organization spoke to you, and what it means now. Obviously you've sat your level 1. So, how has all of those things sort of led to where you are today?
Thank you. So I think it's interesting. A few of us have said we had a non-traditional path, and it strikes me that there's very few people that grow up and say, I want to be a sommelier, or I want to be a master sommelier. It almost seems like the majority of people have come from a non-traditional path. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So wherever you are, there is a place. For me, I feel like I've always had the attitude of never stop learning. I mean, even today, I'm always doing things to learn and to kind of be on the forefront of things. So I feel like every opportunity I've had in my career has kind of built a little tool in my tool belt. And now I come into a job like this and you don't know which tool you're going to pull out. It could be communications, it could be financial, it could be education, it could be, marketing, could be about, managing people. So I feel like the experience is a great way to learn. In terms of credentials, I have an MBA, which I got in between two of my jobs in the corporate world, which is always helpful. But like I said, I think, the CMS one was a great way for me to get kind of that depth and breadth of wine so that I felt comfortable in my job in terms of the people that I work with. It really, it does start from the beginning, but it also goes very deep and very wide very quickly. I personally did the online version. We have both an in-person and an online version, and I've done both now. But when I started, that online was really helpful because you have 6 months to go through the materials, and I could go back and repeat things. And so by the time I got to the exam, I felt like I had the time I needed to go at my own pace. And also just learn from lots of different master sommeliers, because there's only a couple master sommeliers that can be in a classroom, but there's many more that can record videos. So it's more of an on-demand, go at your own pace learning with a full-time job that kind of worked well for me to just do it in the evenings a little bit at a time and be able to go back. So that's what I would say. I would say the online intro, the MBA, but mostly it was just gathering things from all my experiences and then continuing to go to webinars like this and reading every day and just, kind of having that attitude of always learning.
That's great. And we will definitely, I can already see some questions coming through. We are definitely going to touch on some of the stuff that you just mentioned, which is what are the offerings that are out there and how do they help and how do they allow us to make choices. And before we dive into that a little bit more, I want to go through and talk to everybody else about a little bit more about their in-depth journey. Jenny, tell us again what experiences you've had with your qualifications, sort of how they led you to where you are. I'm sure that it will be a very entertaining journey.
I was trying to think back, what was my very first one? And it was probably, I was working for Southern Glazers, probably like an intro to wine. And I realized like there are so many cool things about the world of beverage. There's history, there's geology, there's science, and then it's just a beverage that's delicious. So yes, I have kind of dabbled in all different types of certifications, and ultimately that led me to walking across the diploma graduation stage last April to kind of, bring it all together at that point. But for me, working through suppliers and distributors and different things, I wanted to try different things because I felt like each different type of certification maybe had a different context, a different certainly different objectives, but it just gave a different perspective on how that would better educate myself to be an educator, but also when talking to consumers and family and friends, and certainly now with GuildSom's membership. So through the Society of Wine Educators, I did the Certified Specialist of Wine and Spirits and was a certified wine educator through them. Then I did the CMS level 1 and 2. So I became a certified sommelier. At that point, then I wanted to switch over and learn more about WSET because I hadn't had a chance to do that. So went through level 3 and quickly jumped into diploma after that. So I think, Julie said, always learning, always curious. That's what I tell our team every day. It's like, how do we just keep people excited to learn about our beverage? And I think we all know that with our industry now, whether somebody's going for a certification or not, there's so much fascination with our industry. So to be able to just kind of foster that in the mix of it. One of the things I wanted to share as GuildSom, again, because we don't have an actual certification, we did a member survey last year to see what types of certifications are you currently pursuing or interested in. And it was fascinating to see so many layers of people that are doing all the certifications. And, we know that there are several in the works still going towards MW and MS. But it's really cool, I think, to see the progression and how all of our certification paths and all of the different journeys can overlap. And I think that's pretty cool that somebody may do their, CMS intro and certified, then jump over to WSET, then jump over to ASI and others too. So I don't know if my journey necessarily stops here. Caroline will talk later. MW is next on my path. But there's a point to somehow you have to just kind of celebrate your wins along the way and take a step back too. So I think that's currently where I am in my personal journey through certifications, but it's really exciting to celebrate all of our members and all of the other candidates that are out there working really hard for these exams.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a very good point. And it's a theme that we're going to probably talk more about. It's that it's not one size fits all. It's not pick one track and stick only with that one path. And I think a lot of times, especially when I'm talking to people I notice that they feel very committed. I have to pick one thing that works for me. I have to pick CMS, or I have to pick WST, or I have to pick this one thing. And that is certainly not the case. I think one of the things that I'm sure we'll explore a little bit more of throughout this talk is that they all have multiple meanings and multiple ways that they can be applied. And that's why we do have more than just one path. And to your point, the next one is Master of Wine. So why don't we dig in? Caroline, the floor is yours. Tell us about your experience. I think we're all very curious to hear, were you terrified? How did you survive? Are you intact and in one piece? So please.
Barely. Yeah, so I grew up with parents who loved good food and good wine, and they always had wine bottles on the table at dinner. So seeing those labels was kind of normal to me. And my first jobs after college, I moved overseas. I was in Greece, just as the really exciting Greek wine sector was starting to emerge, and then I moved up to the Czech Republic, as I mentioned, as an equity analyst. So so just being able to just have that sort of familiarity and maybe some distant appreciation sort of set the stage for me wanting to get a little bit more interested. And I was just curious about alcohol. I took a course 20 years ago here in Washington, D.C. It was a 4-week course. And at the end of the course, I asked the instructor, I said, did we go over all of the grapes and all of the wines? And he was like, oh, no, we barely touched the surface. There are so many books out there. There's a lot of, actually, there wasn't a ton of courses, and there was no wine school in Washington, D.C. at the time. But so that's where I did some research and discovered WSET. And so I kind of went from curiosity to realizing, oh my gosh, there's a huge world out there. And WSET just was, and in my opinion, is the most internationally recognized and very comprehensive series of stages that you can progress through. And so I found it was an approach that I loved because it was academic and geeky, and got progressively more challenging as I went through the stages. And so that was fantastic. And then going for the Master of Wine was, I mean, it was a personal challenge. There's very few jobs out there. I think I've seen one, maybe two job postings that require or say that MW and MS are preferred, but it's nothing like the other certifications that are represented here today, where a lot of distributors really want to see that you've done some amount of WSET or core training, or even Wine Scholar Guild, have some kind of awareness like that under your belt. So it was, as has already been said, I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always asking questions. I'm just really curious. And the more I learn about something, the more I just want to learn, do a deeper dive. And I'll just say that I was just at an alcohol beverage conference Monday and Tuesday of this week. And, I'm sitting there and realizing that it was a legal symposium, right? So it was like all the legal issues that are associated with this sector, but there were sessions on mergers and acquisitions, on antitrust, on sustainability and extended producer responsibility. What are we going to do with all of our wine bottles and corks? Ethics and artificial intelligence, you name it. There were so many sessions that at least the alcohol beverage lawyers are grappling with that, of course, comes into the industry. And so this is just, one amazing product that certainly encompasses history, culture, pleasure, etc. But it also, it's a real commodity that governments collect tax on and gets highly regulated. And there's international trade agreements that are brokered in order to get product from country A to country B. So it's just wide reaching. And I think that whatever wine certification you go for, it's all going to add up. It's all going to help. And I guess that's what I mean, certainly my background in wine, whether it was WSET and then being an MW candidate, very much helped me get my regulatory job with the Department of the Treasury regulating the wine industry. But that opened up a whole world to me of the regulatory and compliance side. And then now I'm using that directly in my everyday job. And what I would say is that all of those certifications gave me the technical understanding, a pretty intense technical and business understanding of the entire sector. And I feel like I can navigate through a number of issues that come up for our clients because I just have that breadth. And I think it was just so many of those certifications that I was able to, get under my belt, but then the paths that it would lead me down, that just all added up to where I am now.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, you bring up a very good point that I think a lot of people ask themselves when they start investigating these different credentials, and it's sort of, what do I want to do? Why am I doing this? Where is it going to take me? You bring up another, you sort of split it into two very, very specific things, which was technical and business. And I really like taking it and looking at it from that vein. And to that, I'm going to lean into Christine to talk about her journey, but also talk about the WSET. I know there's a little bit more business added on to that credential. So I'll send it over to Christine to share a little bit more about her experiences.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, it's been fascinating just learning more about my other panelists, but I guess I'll go now. As kind of echoing everyone else here, it seems, I didn't plan on, entering this industry originally, but I kind of got my first taste of it back when I was an undergraduate. At my university, I was studying government and American studies. Thought I was going to work in the government. But at my university, there was a hospitality school and there was an intro to wines class that in your final semester many people took, because why not drink wine during your school day and get some course credits for it and have a good time? So I went into it with very low expectations, but I'm sure as many people who've taken a wine class or another drinks class know that you can catch the bug quite quickly, and I found it absolutely fascinating. I think, as some others have said, I have an interest in history and culture and politics, and there's so much of that interwoven into wine. So that was really my first experience where I said, hey, I had never considered this as a career. Politics were seeming a little less appealing after that course. So I kind of started thinking more seriously about trying to find my place in the wine industry after that. So as I mentioned earlier, I kind of started out in the political journalism world. Wasn't totally in love with it. So I looked for other avenues with the skill set that I had at the time. Other than that intro to wine course, I knew next to nothing more than that about wines, but I did have my journalism background. I was fresh out of college, so I knew how to do social media. So I was able to get a job doing writing and doing social media for a wine magazine. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door there. But of course, when I got there, I wanted to learn more. So I did I think similar to Jenny, did a kind of unaccredited course through a provider in New York City, a couple weeks of tasting really fabulous wine, and kind of continued to get the bug there of taking courses. And then in my next role, after that, I worked for Pernod Ricard, as I mentioned, as a wine ambassador. And in that role, being able to communicate about wine was incredibly important. So I really felt like I needed to fast track my communication skills. And doing that through WSET was the kind of best option for me at the time. I think that, as an ambassador, what does that exactly mean? There was a lot of working with our distributors in the United States, working with folks in the hospitality world, working in conjunction with our marketing team. So I think all of those different aspects of the industry were really benefited by my doing WSET. So I started at level 2. I did level 2 actually in Sydney, Australia, which was lots of fun. And then I came back and did level 3 here in the United States and moved on to diploma. Now, in terms of why I wanted to continue on that WSET journey, and I did dabble in I did the Society of Wine Educators a little bit as well. I think for me, I really knew that I wanted to teach. And that was part of the wine ambassador role. And because WSET has the required coursework component, I knew that this was one path, and then there are many paths to be able to teach about wine, but this was one path that I knew I could take that could upskill me kind of from a logistics standpoint, because there are certain requirements WSET has to be able to teach their courses. So completing first level 3, so I could teach levels 1 and 2, and then continuing on to diploma, and getting all the upskilling along the way was really important for me to be able to teach at first in the organization I used to work for, Pernod Ricard, but then beyond as well. I think another reason why I wanted to pursue these certifications, and I think this is probably true for any of the different qualifications and courses that we've all been discussing, is just kind of increasing my own personal confidence and belief in myself in this industry. Because I started out kind of right after university and college, I was fairly young in the industry, and I feel like I can say, since this is a very female panel we have today, felt kind of intimidated sometimes by an industry that was historically very male, which I think it's changing a bit, but I think many people can feel like maybe they don't fit in the industry for various reasons, whether it's your age, your gender, your background, maybe you have no wine experience. I think all of these qualifications can really help you build your own confidence, both, having people view you externally, but also internally as well. I could walk into a room once I had my level 3, once I had diploma, and say, hey, like, all right, I belong here. I know what I'm talking about. And that was incredibly empowering. And I think that's something we believe so strongly in at WSET. I know you also mentioned, Bonnie, and kind of drawing off of what Caroline was talking about too, kind of the business aspects of pursuing a diploma. The business of wine for me was really important. And I'll just backtrack a second. For those of you who aren't familiar with the diploma, there is a section within that's called, working on the business of wine. So understanding the global wine industry, different parts of, marketing and pricing and, that side of things versus just the grapes and the history and the winemaking, which we cover at the lower levels in WSET. So this focus on the business of wine was important for me working at a global company. So Pernod Ricard, very global, lots of suppliers, et cetera, have that global operations. So I really wanted to understand how that worked. And doing the diploma helped me in that respect. I think too, in my current role at WSET, I'm working with a lot of folks who want to become providers of our qualifications, and having an understanding of these folks' position in the industry, different opportunities and threats based on where they're based, and different trends that are currently happening throughout our wine world helps me to better evaluate what I think might work and what might not. So, that business piece I think was really helpful and unique to me as well, just to get my brain thinking in that way, which is something I hadn't been exposed to before tackling diploma. So yeah, I think WSET, if that's what I'm here to talk about, I think what really drew me to it was kind of helping me communicate with folks, both within the industry and outside the industry, building my own confidence and having that well-rounded understanding of the wine industry on the whole. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think, again, you're touching on a lot of topics that really help drive people's decision making. It's about being able to communicate. It's about that confidence. I think we could all agree gaining the knowledge, regardless of which certification you choose to pursue, being able to go out there and just sound like a little bit more of an authority figure makes you immediately better at what you're doing. And I think that's a real driver behind a lot of what we do, which is to just give individuals that chance to shine. and to shine with confidence. And so I want to take it to more organizationally specific and dive down a little bit deeper. I want to go to Jenny. Jenny, your organization deals with all of the certifications. You work broadly across the various different scopes. You yourself have taken various different certifications. So what would you want to share with us about, what's happening in your organization, what's new, maybe some resources that people might be interested in investigating, because I know that we'd all love to hear kind of your view on that.
Yeah. So GuildSom has almost 9,500 members globally. And so I love seeing so many people on here today. And we have such great partnerships with CMS and WSET that we have, free month trials for anybody within those organizations. So maybe in our follow-up communication, we can send those out. I'm going to kind of loop in one of the questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A as well. Somebody mentioned if you had your diploma and marketing experience, but no contacts, how can you get into the beverage industry? And I think that important part about no contacts is really where a group like GuildSom comes in, or when you're in your individual, with CMS, your class or your group, or even with WSET, the global classroom. So GuildSom started as really a community-based online membership organization, but a way for people to join a discussion forum, find a study group. There's job boards, there's industry event boards. And I think sometimes people might overlook that from GuildSom, knowing us from our podcasts or articles or videos that are available for the public. But those contacts are so important. I was talking to somebody who was in the MW program recently, also somebody who was in the MS program. And, so often there's additional insights that are needed in your really advanced studies or even just getting started. Maybe you want to be connected to a winemaker in Germany, but you don't know where to get started because you just didn't come from that part of the industry. And so utilizing whatever network exists is so important. We were kind of joking right before everyone jumped on this call that oftentimes we put out our information and we'd love for you to contact us and take advantage of those contacts. We want to lift everybody up, not just on this panel, but I know our members and those in the industry, we want to be able to support that. So I've kind of veered off from what we're doing at GuildSom, but so much of what we're doing is not only keeping, everything up to date and adding, daily games and quizzes and adding new sake producer profiles and articles and tasting guides and, the very academic in-depth information, all of that exists to really complement whatever path you're on or no path at all. So we have resources that if you're just starting out, what are the most basic kind of wine, beer, sake, beverage 101 guides. Maybe you have a really small restaurant or retail shop that you don't know where to go to really kind of build those foundations. Or we have those discussion groups and more robust information that supports all the various paths. But that community piece is really where GuildSom is going to, that's really our big focus point this year, is finding ways that our members can feel connected to one another, to find a study group, to find a support network, or again, if they're wanting more additional research and other things too. So we have some fun kind of just friendly competition things that we're playing around with. We're also looking to see how do we grow with somebody's career journey beyond certifications. Oftentimes we hear, I no longer need to study. Maybe that's GuildSom or something else because I'm not studying for a certification. And the world of beverage is so much bigger than that, right? From meeting your certification goal and stopping all curiosity. We hope that's not the case. So we're looking at ways that we can kind of grow with this adaptive learning style that allows, wherever you are in your beverage career or even just as an enthusiast, how can we meet you where you are and give you some, kind of some suggestions or some guidance on how to still foster that curiosity. So there's a lot of cool things in the works kind of on the back end. But community, use it. Use the people, in the contacts that are out there in order to, you never know if that's a job or, just a new experience that you'll gain.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for that. And to your point, the question that came up how do I get into the industry if I'm not, already in it? I always like to recommend to people, if you do a little bit of a certification, whichever you choose, that's always an indicator, but try to continue on the path that you're on. If you're in an industry, being an accountant, try to apply for jobs being an accountant in the wine industry to start, because you have a common link. And then if you get any kind of credential from any of the organizations on your resume as well, that helps to prove that you're interested in this. And obviously, Jenny and her organization can kind of help you decide what might be the right one to do. But I want to turn it over to Julie. You're coming to us from the Court of Master Sommelier. Tell us more about your organization. There's a few questions in the chat about the difference between the levels. So can you comment more on, again, differences between the levels, what's happening at the court, anything new, and again, those resources that would be helpful to any of our attendees today?
Sure. So I think what makes the court unique is there's really three pillars of our certification. There's theory, there's tasting, deductive tasting, and then there's hospitality and service. And that hospitality and service, I think, we're pretty unique in that we're actually, teaching you how to open a bottle of wine, serve sparkling wine, decant wine, and have that hospitality at the table. And then included in the hospitality and service is a theme we've talked about here, which is business. Restaurants need to make money. Wineries need to make money. Retail shops need to make money. And that has an increasingly bigger focus for the court in recent years. So in terms of the levels, in terms of what's different, the introductory level for our courses is really focused on theory. And then you learn tasting and a little bit about service, but you won't be tested on it. So the test is really about theory. But once you get to the second level, which is certified, you are at your examination having to take a theory test, take a tasting test where you're doing the deductive blind tasting, and also do a practical element where you're actually serving a table and opening wine and answering questions. So there's a very hands-on aspect to both the education as well as the certification. And then when you get to the third level, the advanced, and then the top level, the pinnacle of the Master Sommelier, it's really the same structure. It's the theory, the tasting, the hospitality and service, including business. It just gets a lot harder and a lot deeper as you move up the different levels. And then I wanted to share, in terms of what's new, I want to talk about a brand new course that we just launched in the last year. And it's related to this theme around business that we're all talking about. I will share, there was a headline yesterday in the New York Times, and the words were, "Dinner and no drinks. Restaurants are struggling as Americans drink less." And it was just talking about how restaurants are really struggling to make money because in the past, the profit came from the beverage program. And it's still coming from the beverage program. It's just declining. And, one of the things I learned when I was at Procter & Gamble is they would say, don't work harder, work smarter. And so I think just really honing our skills in business is becoming more and more important. So we launched, in the last few months, we launched a standalone course called Som Biz. And it's 3 levels. There's a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And we start from the very beginning. So if you have no business experience, we will define the terms and kind of take you through the whole thing. And then when you get to that third level, it's 3 case studies. So kind of like when I got my MBA in business school, we did a lot of case studies. So there's a case study in retail, a case study in restaurant, opening a new restaurant, and then a case study in being a beverage director of a multi-unit outlets at a resort. So you're really like learning the skills and then applying them. And there's no final exam, but you do earn a certificate when you go through the course and pass the knowledge checks along the way. So I would definitely check that out. I saw there was one comment about somebody was commenting about an import business and a wine club. And I think, again, all of us need to figure out how we can make money so that our businesses will grow, so that we can have good jobs for everybody in this industry. So that's something that's new.
That's great. That's actually great news to hear. And I just have one follow-up question, which is sort of related to some of the questions in the chat. Can you comment? Obviously, you represent the Americas branch. Can someone expect to get the same preparation information, regardless of which branch of CMS they investigate, you know, regardless of where they are in the world, I should say.
Yes, that is very important to us to have a common standard around the world. CMS really is a global organization, and we basically divide the world into two chapters: the European chapter and the Americas chapter. And it's a little misleading because the European chapter also hosts course in Asia and Africa. The Americas chapter also hosts course in certain countries in Asia, South Korea, where we were last week, Japan, the Philippines, and South America. So it's really just kind of dividing it up so that we can go everywhere and try to host as many courses as possible. But we meet on a regular basis. We were actually together with the leaders from the European chapter in February in Miami, and we kind of go through our standards and what's new and just really try to be as consistent as possible. So, you know, there's small differences here and there, but in terms of the standard and the education and what we're teaching, we want to be as common as possible. And, you know, there is on our website some policies related to the different chapters. Basically, you can take courses wherever you want until you get to the advanced level. Once you're at the advanced level, you basically just need to stick with the chapter you started. We don't want people kind of swapping around if they don't get the result on the exam they wanted, go try the other one. So the idea is just once you get to advanced, you need to stick with your chapter. But before that, you know, if you want to take a vacation and go to Puerto Rico or go to Australia and take a course, you can do that wherever, and it should be very consistent.
Fantastic. Excellent. And with that in mind, I'm going to call on Christine now. Tell us a little bit more about the WSET, but I'm specifically going to ask you to make comments about education. There's a lot of questions here in the Q&A about, I've reached this level, I want to be an educator. How do I do that? What's required? You know, what's a good move for me now that I've gotten my level 2 or my level 3? Is diploma required to teach, or can I get to a different level before I teach? So I've lumped in a lot of really important questions, so I don't want to marginalize their importance, but I'm going to let Christine talk a little bit more about that education piece with the WSET.
Yeah, most certainly, happy to. I'll give a brief overview of WSET for those who are less familiar. I'm going to assume that folks have some understanding since you signed up for this webinar through WSET, or actually you could have signed up through our other folks advertising it as well. But anywho, so WSET, for wine specifically, we have levels 1 through 4. So the 1 being the most introductory, and level 4, I saw this question as well, level 4 is synonymous with diploma. So level 4 or diploma is our highest qualification. Now, all of our courses require both coursework that can be done either in person or online, as well as an examination at the end of the course. So for levels 1 and 2, that examination is just theoretical, so you're only doing a multiple choice exam for that. Whereas at level 3 in wines, you begin the tasting component. You'll be tasting during the coursework of level 1 and 2, but level 3 is where you begin doing tasting on your exam. We also introduce short written answer questions at that portion, and the multiple choice questions still exist. And then at diploma, things really explode. We have 6 different units, theory and tasting, and a research paper covering still wines, viticulture, winemaking, the business of wine, sparkling wines, fortified wines. That was out of order, but 6 different units. So there's a really, similarly to the court, there's a progression from the beginning throughout. You can start at different places. So if you have some experience in the industry, maybe you want to start at level 1, but you could start at level 2 or 3, as long as you have the existing knowledge that you need to begin there. To enroll in diploma, though, you have to have completed level 3 successfully. So that's really a hard line. I want to say barrier to entry, but prerequisite is the more positive term there. So if we want to focus a little bit on how do you become a WSET educator, because I also saw quite a few questions on that, and that's something that I work with quite frequently as folks who want to teach for us. At the most basic level, to teach levels 1 and 2, you must have completed level 3. To teach level 3, you must have completed diploma. Now, that said, we also have an educator training program, and that is a program where you will learn more in depth how to teach WSET qualifications. It's offered both in person and online, and that is the way to become a certified educator for WSET. Now, enrolling, I'm sure the next question is, how do I get onto this program? Enrolling in the educator training program, you more than welcome to reach out to me after this webinar, and we'll be sending all of our follow-up information. But typically you'll need to be either starting a new approved program provider or teaching for an existing provider. And that's the way you can get onto the course. Just because there's so many people that want to become educators, we prioritize folks who actually have an avenue to teach our qualifications. So that's that at a very basic level, kind of those are our requirements for teaching. The other piece of that is just the structure of our organization is that we have, if we want to call it WSET Global, which is the larger company that Bonnie and I both work for. We're based in the Americas, but we have folks headquartered in London and then really all throughout many places in the world. And then we have our APPs, which I've mentioned a few times, which are approved program providers. And those are folks who've gone through a very rigorous application process and approval process with WSET, and they're approved to offer various qualifications for us. So if you're to become an educator, you must be teaching through one of these approved program providers. So even if you go through the educator training program, it's not like you can just start teaching anywhere, anytime. To be able to do it in our, through our system, you have to be, teaching through one of these providers. So again, happy to offer more explanation on how to become an educator. I'll also direct people to our YouTube page. I know we've done some webinars in the past on becoming an educator for WSET. So if that's something you're really interested and passionate about, there's further resources I know that we've created there before.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Christine. I think we have addressed, I'm just scrolling really quickly, address a lot of the questions regarding education specifically. Or becoming an educator, I should say. There is one question, actually, Caroline, I'm going to send this one to you. We have an individual who is interested in becoming a Master of Wine. They have their diploma. Congratulations. They've done a lot with the Wine Scholar Guild. Also exceptional. CWS certification, a very, very in-depth educational experience, but they are not currently in the wine industry. Is there any hope for enrollment in the Master of Wine program?
Well, it's up to our admissions committee, but you do have to have experience in the wine sector. So I sold wine at retail for many years, and then I taught WSET for a number of years before I applied to the Master Wine program. And that's usually the biggest barrier because they really want to have candidates that bring their experience to the program. But I mean, it sounds like this person has a lot of demonstrated interest and knowledge, and that's really important. The other thing I'll say is that you got to know how to write and craft arguments. And so what they say is especially for the tasting evaluation, the practical part of the exam, that you have to, what do they, no, I can't remember it. It's taste like a detective and write like a lawyer. And so you're gathering all of your evidence from your glass of wine to craft your argument, your written argument for the exam. And there's a real art to the writing. And maybe, some people might say, well, that's maybe antiquated and we don't need that anymore. But there's a word that's been mentioned a number of times, communication. What they're really trying to do is to ensure that people that do have the Master of Wine qualification are able to communicate to really any stakeholder intelligently. It doesn't mean that we have to be an expert in every single topic, but we have to be able to communicate. And one way to do that is to be able to articulate your thoughts through writing. So definitely you have to have experience in the trade. But also, that'll just be up to the admissions committee, and I would encourage anyone that's interested to apply or to, feel free to contact me, and I can pass your questions on to the committee and try to get a feel for where your qualifications are. And then just the other part is that communication.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Caroline. And I think the big takeaway that I'm hearing, again, it really depends on what you're already doing. And so if you want to be in the industry more and you already have a lot of credentials, don't be afraid to do something that's associated, whether you end up doing something in a retail store, or you try to be a consultant, or, you're doing some part-time work, or, you're just, working with someone on an ad hoc basis, getting a little bit of that experience just to show that you're committed, you can do. And then also have your credentials, which will help you. And I think there are some other questions in here that I just want to touch on in the last 5 minutes that talk about, more clearly expressing how the trainings are different. And while I'll welcome any of my panelists to chime in if you have something additional to say, I know that from my experience and from hearing what you have to say today, the CMS is certainly going to be more in the restaurant, a lot more of that focus on service and what's happening with that individual in the moment during their, I'll call it their hospitality experience, because I think hospitality is growing and we don't want to just say restaurants are just this or just that. So certainly more in that vein. But they're still going to have the technical aspect. So, France is still going to have the same grapes that we're going to talk about at the WSET that they're going to talk about at, whether you're looking at stuff from GuildSom or Wine Scholar Guild, those grapes, that technical aspect is going to be the same. So you sort of have to ask yourself, what's the function? And then as far as WSET is concerned, it's a little bit more of that. We certainly do not touch on the service component the way CMS does. So if you're not necessarily interested in that and you're looking a little bit more about whether it's distribution, import, things of that nature, you're going to get that technical part. You're also going to get a little bit more information regarding, some of the wine business trends and things of that nature. So I think while that is a very overly simplistic way of kind of breaking it down between those, two specific organizations, I think that's one way to look at it. What are you trying to do? What are you interested in? And I think the other key takeaway from what everyone has been saying today is, what's your passion? What really interests you? Do you love being by the table and talking to folks and pulling things out of the cellar and hopefully opening that wine at the table without spilling it on everyone, which, trust me, that could be any of us, or probably has been most of us. Or are you interested in doing something a little bit more behind the scenes? So I know that there are probably tons of questions that we haven't quite gotten to. And as all of our panelists have said, we'll certainly send out contact information. With that, I'm going to open it up for our panelists to make any final comments in the last couple of minutes, or touch on anything that maybe we haven't addressed.
I'll jump in, Bonnie, to add to what you were saying. We know that it's sometimes difficult to find the time to dedicate to and to jump into one of these certifications, but that's going to be the best way to get a sense of it. So if you're brand new into it, maybe it's really digging into the resources on everyone's website, CMS, WSET. I read specifications for both. I mean, very well detailed. Do your research there, and then maybe see if there's a local provider or do an online, class, and start with introduction through CMS, start with level 1 or level 2 WSET. You'll get a sense of the curriculum and the way that the examinations work, and that might foster, that path too. Ask people, ask your local, restaurateur, your som, your buyer at your local wine shop, and everyone has an opinion that they like to share oftentimes. So I think just keep that curiosity open and lean on the community for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else from any of the rest of our panelists? It is 1:59 Eastern time here in the United States. So I just want to be mindful of everyone's schedules. Anything else from our team of fabulous panelists?
I just wanted to mention, to build on Jenny's point, our website is mastersommeliers.org, mastersommeliers.org. And we have a ton of resources on there. We have something called the resource library. There's practice exams, there's curriculum, there's all kinds of great resources. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can just kind of meet the people. And there's a lot of just little personal videos about people's experiences, so you can get to know the organization better through that. And then the third thing I want to mention is we're really committed to making the Master Sommeliers more accessible to people all around the world. You know, if you don't have a Master Sommelier in your town, you still should be able to get to experience and be inspired by that. So we've created this thing called office hours, where anyone who's a student can set up a one-on-one appointment with a Master Sommelier just by going onto the website. And there's dates and times available, and you can kind of pick what time works for you and get to meet someone. And, you know, you can talk about exams, but you can also just talk about your career, or how do you make contacts, or what was it like for them. So that's something. Or if you take an online course and you don't get to meet a Master Sommelier at your in-person course, it's a great way just to have that one-on-one interaction.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I see a couple questions of people are concerned about getting websites. We are going to send out a follow-up email to everybody, so please don't be concerned. There'll also be a link to this recording, so if you feel like you want to watch that and go backwards and just kind of double check some things that have been said. The last thing I want to note is that some people have asked, where can I get this certification? They asked specifically about WSET. We do have a where to study page. That'll also be included in some of the comms, or just Google WSET where to study. I think it's the same for CMS. And if you don't see an approved program provider there specifically, you can choose program providers and do online content, which, you know, maybe is not the preferred experience, but there's still options for you out there. I'm sort of rushing. I want to jam all this in. I just want to give one more final thank you to everybody that's been on this panel. We all have really busy schedules, but I can tell already by the comments, it's been wonderful to dive into this issue. We might try to do something like this again overseas, which I think would be fantastic. And so with that, I will simply say thanks so much. It was lovely chatting with everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone for joining.